Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your host. Throughout the weeks, we touch on lots of aspects of what a positive safety culture looks like. You probably know my tagline right by now. Every company's got a culture, but is it the one you want? And I firmly believe everybody, senior management, after that same thing, getting people home safely. And there's many opportunities, I think, here to support any company willing to listen and learn a little bit on ways they can get there. I want to thank all the viewers. When you check us out, make sure to share and like, and you know the drill. You got to help populate the universe, all the cool stuff we're doing. This week, we have with us is Barry Nelson. He is the president and CEO of FactorLab Inc, a company integrating technology along with data and behavioral science to dramatically reduce the risk of serious injuries and fatalities, or SIFs, in the workplace. And as a safety practitioner, SIFs is a big deal. Barry has spent the last 2 decades helping organizations achieve sustainable and dramatic reduction in worker injuries. He's proudly supported executive and safety teams of some of the largest contractors, utilities, and energy companies in the world. In 2001, he founded DBO2/Predictive Solutions, which now serves thousands of viewers and is the largest known repository of leading risk indicators in the world. Yes, I know he has my attention. I'm sure he does yours when we talk about leading indicators. During his time for Predictive Solutions now at FactorLab, Barry continues to help organizations find new ways to apply technology and data science as a source of competitive advantage. Barry, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Just fine. Thank you for joining us. And you've been at this a lot and just got to rewind a little bit. So this is one of the largest known repositories known to mankind of leading indicators. That's a pretty broad statement, sir.
Well, I know. I don't know. It makes me, I don't know how suddenly I found that I'm the oldest guy in the room. I used to not be the oldest guy in the room, but yeah, we were very fortunate back in like 2000 to have a customer that was doing something completely different. They were trying to win a job for Intel, actually. And the guy, we had done some predictive work on sales stuff, and he wanted to know if he could use a Palm Pilot at the time to put his safety form on there and use that to predict which of his subcontractors was going to have an accident or injury first, and then win this award from Intel so he could sell more work to them. And that's how I got into the business a long time ago. And so I mean, we've done all kinds of interesting stuff in that space. Like in those days, for those younger viewers around here, the Palm Pilots didn't just magically connect to the internet. You literally had to push a button and then it would sync, and then you had to call the internet. And it's all before software as a service. And so, yeah, we've been at this a long, long time.
So it is not your first rodeo, as my granddaddy would say.
No, sir, not my first rodeo. We joke all the time. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're doing just fine. So what's from your time in the field, and you guys have been at this a long time. You got a great team supporting your efforts, and you've worked with really large companies, medium-sized companies. So from your perspective, what's some good attributes of a positive safety culture?
It's a great question. I think the number one thing that organizations that we see, and we've seen them all, is that the executives care. It's an overused word, but that they really care. Because if they don't care enough to go out and do the things that they need to do, they're just never going to implement the systems and create the leaders and do all the things that they need to do to make that happen. So the first is they got to care.
Okay.
Second is they have to be willing to do the things that are necessary to create trust. Because the biggest challenge that organizations have with operationalizing a safety culture is people are afraid. They don't trust what leadership's real intentions are. And then the third one is a mindset around building resilient systems as opposed to fixing people. So if you have those three things, I care enough, I'm going to
Okay.
do what I need to do to create trust, and I'm thinking about responding to errors and problems and bad things in a way that it's what can I do to fix the system. You're on the right path to building, I think, the healthiest of safety cultures that I've seen.
Wow. So I got to pull the string a little bit. You're saying about trust and creating trust. What's that kind of look like if you're getting trustworthy with your employees, for lack of a better phrase?
Right. Well, I mean, I know you. Some of this you're very nice to ask the question, but most of it comes down to how do you respond when something unplanned event happens. Not even necessarily an unplanned event with a consequence, but if someone in your organization has the courage to report a near miss, what exactly do you do, and how do you respond in a way that gives them both value in that and also removes any anxiety they may have about sharing that with the organization.
Wow. Okay. So I got to peel that onion a little bit more when you're saying provides them value from the eye of the beholder. How is that not measured, but what's that really mean? Providing value to the person.
Well, the value comes in lots of forms,
Okay.
but let's just say that you come to me with a near miss, and I can respond by starting to ask you a whole bunch of why questions. Why did you do this? Why did that happen? What's going on here? And just immediately, starting to attack and look for what's wrong or what's to blame. Or I could respond by saying, "Gosh, Mike, that's awesome that you brought this forward, and it's particularly awesome because this is a tough situation." And start asking you questions that
Perfect.
make you feel good about sharing this and that you're valued for sharing this, as opposed to you're the messenger that's going to get, somehow have some consequences or be the guy who's going to be tattled on or whatever. So that's an example.
Very inside. So was it one of the best examples I have? I was working with a company, and one of their Teamsters, guys drive the big trucks. He was sliding this big metal cabinet towards the front of the stake bed truck and managed to get a stinger on his thumb. He kind of pushed too hard. Nothing broken, nothing torn. It's called a stinger. And so this is a new company. They said, well, we want to have a discussion with him. So he shows up and at the big C-suite conference room. He's in his coveralls. And Rick, you got to bring Barry back up because we got to see his reaction. So there's around 30 people in the room, including the
Right.
president, the vice president, the director of safety, of course. And there's a poor guy with his bib coveralls. And it's about 2-3 days after it happened. So they got very quizzical with him, and he was very patient. And towards the end of it, the vice president looks around the room and he says, "And what did we learn today?" And the Teamster raised his hand. He goes, "I learned I'm not going to tell you that unless I get hurt really bad."
Right.
Yeah. And it fits in exactly what you're saying, because they had the best intentions, by the way.
That's right.
But it totally missed. And they came to me and they were shocked because we can't believe that. And I said, "Well, I can." And they said, "What should we do?" I said, "Well, the first thing you do, go find that guy who's at lunch, get his permission to sit down with him, and you apologize to him. You played it wrong."
Yeah.
And so that took a little courage. And I says, otherwise, he can become the reverse of a champion in about an hour, because he's not going to be real happy the way he got treated with the best of intention. So that insight is right on target. So out of those three and the stuff we talked about so far, if you're going to pick one critical skill, someone at that C-suite level should apply every day, it almost becomes automatic to them, to support a
Sure.
safety culture, what would that look like?
It's a great question, and I'll tie it back to what you were just saying before. It's celebrating unplanned events, right? How do we as an organization respond to unplanned events? And how do we celebrate those as opposed to just what you were talking about, just you were just describing, Mike? So, and that requires a little bit of planning, and it requires a lot of practice, because it doesn't sound like, when you think about it, something well, that you have to learn, or you have to be taught, or you have to practice. But the reality is, you do, and so you have to. You have to be conscious about it. And just, I want to echo what you said. there are a lot of people who want to have a really good safety culture, and they try and do a lot of things that on the surface would sound like a good idea, but what they either don't have experience with or no one shared with them or whatever is that there are sometimes unintended consequences. So there has to be, as an executive, the skill is how are we going to, as an organization, what is our positive reinforcement system? What are we going to do to create an environment where people see value in and know that it's safe and to share things that on the that they're frankly they're scared to share. So
Good point. Very good.
and by the way, how are we? And the other which is related to that, how do we get good as an organization at taking appropriate action to fix our systems? So the other thing that drives people crazy is to share information and just nothing ever happens. Because I find out really, really quick, and it has a corrosive effect because I didn't want to do it in the first place. I didn't get in trouble, but nobody did anything. So this is a big giant waste of my time. So I'm just going to go do my job. And I don't think people are mad about it. They just, they're not fostering or building the culture that they really want. And so that's the skill, responding to unplanned events.
I really like that. And to touch on what you were just saying is, this is kind of human nature. If I work with you and I come in your office, knock on the door, he says, Mike, how you doing? And I've got this passionate, great idea either to reduce a potential hazard or a different way to do business. He goes, let me get back to you. And I said, okay. So I go skipping back to my toolbox. I'm just on cloud 9. And then I wait and I wait and I wait some more. And I hear nothing. I hear crickets. And I might try it one more time because I'm kind of persnickety guy and I want to see what I can do. But after about the second time of not hearing anything, it could be, hey, Mike, that's a great idea, but we got to wait till next year when we see if we got more funding. That'd be cool. But you're right. If people don't hear anything, I think human nature is pretty soon, why should I bother? Because it's not important to my boss.
That's exactly right. Okay. And his boss and the other boss, and the other is you'll notice what you described there. You get into this non-virtuous cycle or unvirtuous cycle. I believe either one of those are a real word. But the point is, instead of a virtuous cycle, he reports something, then the CEO or whoever gets mad because nobody's reporting anything. So then they come out and everybody's got to beg everybody to report stuff, and then nobody does anything, or they do weird stuff. And so it's this energy that's and frustration in the organization that I think wears people down. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that organizations run into is they're just exhausted. People are, I tried it, it didn't work. I tried it again, it didn't work. I'm going to go back to my human nature, which is I'm just going to do the most efficient thing that I can, and I'll try and respond best I can when I see something, but I'm not, I give up in a way at some level. I just lose the energy to do it.
Sure.
And that's,
you kind of end up, you just mentally resign and we'll move on, and you can move on to your daily job. Before we go to break, I got to cue this up because it's a little bit of a teaser for the viewers. So they got to stick around anyway. So you may be one of the few organizations that has some answers to this, because I like to talk to my guests. Is there a way to actually measure improvements in your safety culture, or is it more organic in nature, kind of just like art, you either see it or you don't?
It's interesting. I would say the answer to that is you can. And I think the best way to measure the health of your culture is to measure the words that come out of your frontline leaders when they talk to those closest to the work. Really? I don't believe, it would be heresy to a lot of people, Mike, I don't believe surveys are helpful. And I don't think ticking boxes is helpful relative to measuring your culture. But I do think the keys lie in the mouths of your frontline leaders and their supervisors and how they respond to those words.
And you touched on something that I've yet to decode. This really odd little Gordian knot is about surveys. I believe there is a potential for some value from them. Again, how are the survey questions framed? How do they deploy the whole survey process to the organization versus, you just get a streaming email, fill it out in 10 minutes or else. And then most importantly, how does management respond to all that data? Because it's going to be kind of raw, unfiltered, not normalized, and a lot of it is going to maybe reflect more of a personal opinion. They had a really bad morning at home versus how things are really going at work.
Well, it's a very interesting thing, and I'm not picking on surveys. I mean, I've been I've been in 20 years, I've been doing, various forms of surveys, so I know all about ticking boxes, and I know all about the data, and I can tell you stories about all that. But there's a couple of challenges with them that let me just say it this way. One is they're not frequent enough. So if you ask me a question today, just to your point, I don't know, that's just one point in time. I need to hear lots of stuff from you. And they also have a tendency to be a way for me to answer a question about what I think you want me to say, or how
Yep.
I'm answering a question based on what I think there's some level of that bias that's in there.
Yes.
A more effective way to get at it, and we couldn't do this before, by the way, this is a brand new stuff, is measure what people do, not what they say they're going to do or what they did.
Wow.
Right? So
Okay.
I hear you talking, you and I having a conversation. There's no it is what it is. And if we just think about this conversation, if we just had this conversation, we'd have one point of view on it. But if I could look at 10 of these conversations pretty quickly, we'd be able to figure out, what did we talk about? What topics did we tend to talk about? How much energy is in the room? And what do we care? There's a whole bunch of implied things that come out of a dialogue, especially if you group a bunch of them together, that start to get to a picture of what's really authentic, what's organic, what's
Excellent.
really, really happening.
Excellent.
And that, I think, holds promise for the culture.
That's one of the better answers I've ever had for that question. Viewers, do me a favor. Stand by. We're going to come back. I guarantee you're going to learn something today you probably never encountered before, and it can truly enhance everything you do on a daily basis. We'll be right back.
Safety Culture Strategies provides world-class safety culture and safety program management consultative services for clients throughout the United States. Whether your company is pursuing Voluntary Protection Program STAR designation, ISO 45001 certification, or considering a comprehensive review of your current safety programs and processes, Safety Culture Strategies brings hands-on experience combined with a unique perspective that readily translates from senior management to task-level personnel. This collective skill set provides you with a very insightful health check of your overall safety management system that can also assist with reducing injuries and attrition, as well as increasing profitability. Safety Culture Strategies is also certified to provide Ziegler Institute employee engagement training and leadership coaching. When combined with established relationships with federal and state regulators, Safety Culture Strategies is uniquely positioned to assist the safety culture efforts of any company. For additional information, visit www.scstrat.com or call us at 702-780-1410. After all, every company has a safety culture, but is it the culture you want?
And we're back. I appreciate everybody hanging in. We're going to go back momentarily and talk to Barry Nelson. To kind of tease you a little bit, I'm going to hold up a form that I found on his website. It's entitled The Simple Seven, and it's some really neat, unique attributes for a daily tailgate safety briefing. And as I'm learning what's going on with the folks at FactorLab, see if we can find Barry. He's out there and hanging out in the internet land somewhere. So this is something that you say companies can use. So do they have to reinvent all their tailgate safety briefings and start over and do a bunch of spatial training? What's going on, Haas? You got to help me. I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, no. Well, I think let's take a step back if we can, Mike, and just talk about this activity. So there's two parts of well, first of all, let's back even farther up than that. We believe that the most important activity that happens during the day relative to safety is the conversation between the crew leader and those closest to the work when you start off the day. Right, Mike?
Yes, sir. You bet.
Exactly. And so a lot of people would agree with that. And to do that, what did we do? We came up with this idea that we're going to make a form some kind of form. Everybody's a short form, long form, and
yeah,
we're going to
okay.
make sure that people are having these things. And to do that,
Gotta
then
have
I'm
a
going to
form.
got to have a form. You got to fill out the form, and everything's on the form. And if you fill out the form, then I know you're having a conversation.
Yes.
And the reality is, and then by the way, then I got to sign the form. Now I prove because you filled out the form, but I don't know you're there. I'm going to make everybody sign the form. It's ridiculous if you think about it. So nobody knows anybody was really having a conversation. By the way, it's insulting to someone if you really think about it. I'm going to fill out this form, and then I'm going to hand it to you and tell you to sign it, and that's going to somehow imply something that if you get hurt, you're now, you know what I mean, I'm absolved of some responsibility because I signed your silly form. It's unhealthy. So anyway, now the concept is still very, very healthy, which is, yeah, there should be, it doesn't hurt to have something that triggers people's mindset to say, what are we going to do today? Let's, think about how we would avoid that. That's all perfectly fine. And if you want to have a piece of paper or something that helps people remember that, no problem. But the magic is the conversation, right? And so we say that's really, really good. But here's the question, Mike. What's the recipe for a good conversation? So what does one look like? Just you tell me in your own experience, what do good conversations look like?
Great question. To me, a good conversation, when I see interactions with people involved in that morning meeting, it's not just the foreman and the safety guy preaching to everybody else.
Exactly. So there's dialogue, right?
Yes,
So first of
there
all,
we go.
not monologue, it's dialogue. Exactly. The second thing is they're probably talking about the hazards of the day. Like there's some, regular hazards that you got to look at. So there's slips and trips or whatever sort of nominal stuff. You would probably like them to be talking about the more serious hazards, not just ignore, you know what I mean, the
Yes.
big stuff. Just don't go through the motions. Maybe they'd even talk about precursors. Maybe for your more advanced guys, they talk about, are you tired? Is it change? That'd be awesome. The other thing that happened is it probably would be some good questions. They would,
Yes.
they wouldn't just ask like, what are we going to do today? It would be a thoughtful question. What changed before today and yesterday?
Beautiful.
The observer would be engaged, participants would be engaged, and maybe most importantly, the person who was leading the call would demonstrate that they cared about those people that they were talking to. They would be showing respect and care,
Cool.
right?
Yep.
About not only about them and this activity, and you would be able to see it. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be like, okay, let's get Mike, let's get this thing done. What do you got there? There's something different. Well, if you take all of what I just said, by the way, we found out we talked to thousands of safety professionals, and generally people agree with that. They say, that's pretty good. Maybe I want a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. But if you take that, it wasn't written down anywhere. So we simply just wrote that down and said, look, here are 7 elements that we see that others like you find interesting in a daily planning conversation. You don't need to do anything different. All these are absolute common sense. But here is a framework for if you're going to have a conversation, here's 7 ideas you might think about to help you have a good one. And you can reference it. If you don't like it, you can change it, but you don't need to do anything different, but just help your people understand what good looks like.
And just real quick thumbnail on that, because we got a few minutes left in the show, and we definitely want to be talking about some other topics for the viewers, and you'll get information later on the show how to get a hold of Barry and his company. High level, there's back and forth discussion. They cover all the bases. They move past compliance to care, which fascinates me. They discuss risks, both big and small. And odds are there's going to be some safety professional out there going to go, wow. We wish our daily briefs touched on that. So let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes, as my granddaddy would say. He had about a third grade education, farmer in northern Missouri, one of the smartest guys I ever met. His most famous one he stole from somebody else, fast, good, or cheap, pick 2. So if we go in the meat and potatoes of this, so the premise of this facet of what we have with FactorLab is someone can record that safety briefing they're going to do anyway. And then there's some magic behind the scenes AI technology that you guys have developed.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for letting me answer this question. So there's a couple things that need to happen. So there's a mobile application. Doesn't matter what kind of device you have. Mobile application that allows you to simplify the paperwork piece and also just capture while you're doing it. capture a little 2-minute video. It doesn't even matter, by the way, if you're pointing at the people or you're pointing at the work. The point is to capture the conversation between the crew leader and those closest to the work, right? Now, when we do that, we can then pull that text out of the conversation, we call it transcribe it, and you can take that text and then you can apply a machine learning model against those words. So we worked with the University of New York in Buffalo on a 7-month project, 3 PhDs, to be able to build a series of models that'll score each of those 7 dimensions: care, planning, question quality, all that sort of stuff. And what it'll allow you to do is see the, if you will, the atomic structure of an individual conversation relative to the attributes that value to you. What that allows you to do, if you can see one conversation, then you can see 1,000 conversations. And so what we found out that's interesting there is that groups of conversations have certain patterns, and that there are really about 6 sort of patterns of conversations that you're going to see in the field. They range from, people who score really high on all those dimensions. You're going to have a certain group of those people. You're going to have a group of what we call preachers. They really think that the purpose of the activity is just to tell people stuff. You're going to have another group, I call the quizzers. Their job they think is to quiz people in these conversations. And then you're going to have another group, which is they have no foggy idea why they're doing this activity. So, and it becomes abundantly clear. And so what this allows you to do is peel back to the why questions of why do this group of people really think it's a good idea to be a preacher? Why do these people have no idea of the purpose of this activity? And that allows you to fix the system that is influencing the people that are making the decisions to lead the conversation. So while it's about a conversation, it is really, Mike, about what is the conversation telling you about your culture and what it's doing to influence the kinds of conversations that people are happening.
Wow. So
Makes sense?
Now you got my undivided interest, and I know there's a whole bunch of viewers going, tell me more. So I have my safety morning brief. I've done my little video. Now, do I have to do a whole bunch of transcription? Do I have to hire like 100 people to help me decode it? What kind of happens next?
It's automatic. So you hit a little button, you record the video, it transcribes it automatically, it scores automatically, you get it back, and you get it back like it's like a social feed. We turned the safety stuff upside down because nobody wants to see the way we do safety metrics is all wrong anyway, so that's a whole separate conversation. But we've made it much more like you'd see an Instagram or how people want to view it. Right. So what happens is you do it, and then that gets pushed out to whoever who needs to see it. It shows up on their phone, and they can watch the video, they can read the transcription, they can see where it was healthy, and they can even coach or provide feedback right there. Because what we found is that, most of this information is very perishable. I just want to know right now, what happened right now. I want to be able to respond in, by the way, in an unstructured way. I don't need some big form. I just want to send, you could even send a video coaching back. And so make it easy, like we've learned from these social technologies, for people to communicate and leverage, and by the way, provide positive reinforcement, all that stuff we talked about before. That fosters an environment to get people to engage, which gives you the data to see the system breakdowns and the leadership challenges, which is really what's reflected in these things is really the health and state of your leaders and what they think they're supposed to do right now, which is what organizations really need to see in order to be able to make things better.
And we got a couple of minutes left. Have you got 1 or 2 success stories you could share from some of your current suite of customers on how they've been able to apply this very unique approach to their daily safety brief?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of quick ones. It's really remarkable. So on one level, the level of engagement is measured usually in the 5, 10, 15, 50-fold more people participating in a healthy way. On the metric side, we have stories where people will say they gave us their worst site, and where a site was having a lot of accidents and injuries, and they were able to reduce the number of accidents and injuries by like 75% in 12 weeks. Now,
really,
let me tell you, yeah, for sure. But I'll tell you why. Not because of the silly technology, but we by using this system and thinking about this, we're activating people talking about the conversation between the crew leader and those closest to the work. And when you do that, you flush out a whole bunch of other stuff that really needs to get worked on. Like, this guy just doesn't care. He doesn't understand the purpose of the activity. These people don't know what they're doing. All those things, when combined together, actually reduce accidents and injuries. So by getting people sort of focused, that's what happened. It's not about, I did a video or I see a thing on my phone. That does help, but it's the bigger, I like to think of it as sort of a proxy indicator for leadership and cultural health. And if you focus on those things and help people understand what it is you're talking about, you will see a significant impact, depending on where you are in the journey.
Wow. Well, believe it or not, I knew this was going to happen, because anytime Barry and I chat, like 2-3 hours later, Meryl come upstairs and says, "Are you guys finished yet?" She wants to cook dinner. So we're getting towards the end of the show. I apologize in advance, but Barry, we're going to have to bring you back. This is a fascinating discussion. So you've been at a national conference. I think you've done 1 or 2 of them. You finished your speech. They're chanting your name. Everybody wants your autograph. They want to pay a royalty to come back the next day and speak again. So as you go to leave the stage, what's 2 or 3 items you hope people really write down and take back to their organizations to help their culture?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the number one thing, if you never, ever, forget anything else from this conversation, the most highest impact thing that you can do in 2022 is listen carefully to the conversations between the crew leaders and those closest to the work. And the second thing that you can do is find ways to celebrate the conversations that best align with the values and beliefs that you want in your organization, or, to your point, Mike, align with the culture that you desire.
Wow. Excellent feedback. So Barry, before we ring off and say goodbye, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, thank you. You can do a couple things. You can email me, barryn@factorlab.com. You can go to factorlab.com and download our white paper. Right on the homepage is 30 pages of put you to sleep math and science on how all this works. But it's a lot of stuff that people who are watching this show are going to appreciate. You can do that. That's the best way to get a hold of us. We'd love you to visit with us, fill out, stop by and say hello. We're a no pressure kind of a salesy thing. We're the kinds of people who want to help those folks who understand and appreciate what we've been talking about here today, which is, I'm trying to operationalize a culture. I'm trying to close the gap between what the senior executives want and believe and what they're trying to do, but they just can't do. So we just try and be helpful in that. And if we can, we'd love to talk to people who share that point of view and be useful if we can.
Well, I definitely share your point of view. I think we're brothers from different mothers, or however that works. Cannot thank you enough for having you on the show today. You have a great weekend. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of this week's show for Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. Each week we have a little different spin. We're now booking guests through October and going into November. So we're getting some momentum here. People want to share their thoughts. So, well, Mike, how can we get a hold of you? Thank you for asking. Easiest way, you can check my website, www.scstrat.com. You can send me an email that gets really tricky, mike@scstrat.com, or call my office, 702-780-1410. Until next time, enjoy the conversations you have throughout your organization. God bless, and be safe out there.